Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Debbie, for lighting the candles. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Interfaith Community Sanctuary. This is the fourth Sunday of the month, and I welcome you all here. And I thank you for joining me as together we continue to deepen our understanding of and our commitment to this year's discernment, making a home for the mystic heart. And together we shall continue exploring ways where we can help each other through our dedication to our spiritual path of contemplation and self-surrender, as we seek to find that unity with the divine, which is at the core of making a home for the mystic heart. And this month, we're looking at how confession and forgiveness contributes to that goal. But first, as is our tradition here at Interfaith Community Sanctuary, we begin by inviting in our ancestors and honoring our first peoples. And to do that this morning, Zach is so kindly offered to volunteer. Well, you probably have to bring that mic down.
Morning, folks. Let's take a moment and kind of ground, relax, maybe take a deep breath or two. Put a parenthesis in our day and just be here right now in this moment together. If it feels nice to you, maybe close your eyes and just think about your immediate ancestors. Immediate people, your blood ancestors, also your mentors. So your mom, your dad, your aunts, uncles, grandparents. Maybe you were lucky like me and had a great-grandmother that was in your life. Those immediate ancestors that helped you find your way in the world. And then if you think a little bit farther back, you can think maybe the great-great-grandmothers, grandfathers, maybe even farther back to those that we know from history, all the people that came before us, those luminaries that we stand on their shoulders, we follow in their wake. If you go farther and farther back, it's a little fuzzy, but there's still people there trying their best, figuring out the world that it looked around them at the time, figuring out where to go, what to do, just like us right now today. We can connect with them. They had lives, worries, hopes, dreams, just like we do. We are their hopes and dreams, or at least their manifestation of what they thought, perhaps. So we can connect to them, we can thank them. We can feel that one family, one personhood of humanity. We're all together. And so we thank them, we connect to them, we ask them to come to here right now, be with us today in this moment. And we'll move on from there. Thank you. As far as the first peoples, we have numerous writings back there on the altar, or on the side of the altar there. And there's lots of things about first peoples, lots of things about all sorts of different things, the divine feminine, other things like that. But today, for the first peoples honoring, I'm going to read something that looks like about 8 different local first people representatives came together to write this. One of them is our sister Siswinkile Laura Boucher, and then there's 7 other folks. I'm not going to read all their names. They're very difficult to read, actually. But this is what they wrote. This land that we live, work, and prosper upon has always been and will always be indigenous people's land. Today, as we gather in this sacred space, on this sacred land, we acknowledge, we honor, and we celebrate the ancient Coast Salish Peoples. We recognize the Duwamish tribe, who are still present today despite centuries of colonialism, oppression, violence, and neglect. We pray, we bless, we hold the vision that their inherent tribal sovereignty be restored. We advocate for the Duwamish tribe to receive promised benefits that are granted to all recognized tribes, such as education programs, health assistance, and social services. We honor and celebrate local Indigenous spiritual leaders who have deeply touched our community in lasting ways through their example, forgiveness, generosity, kindness, wisdom, and more. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. And another one of our lovely traditions we have each Sunday morning is that we provide an offering to the Divine Feminine. And Debbie, again, has been so kind as to volunteer this morning.
Good morning. This morning we have a reading from Teresa of Avila. She was from the 1500s and a Carmelite nun. She was like the founder of the Carmelites, right? Or no? No? Okay. I was like, I know that name. Anyway, so this magnificent refuge is inside you. Enter, shatter the darkness that shrouds the doorway. Be bold, be humble. Put away the incense and forget the incarnations they taught you. Ask no permission from the authorities. Close your eyes and follow your breath to the still place that leads to the invisible path that leads you home.
Thank you. I love that reading. Thank you very much. So before we get into other things, we also have some other housekeeping issues. One of them is that we have to keep this lovely sanctuary open and operating and standing as it is so lovely right now. And to that end, we need to raise funds. So we have what's called sharing our wealth at this point. And while we're going to pass the hat around or the basket around or the bin around, whatever that is back there, I also like to remind there's other ways of giving as well. Monetarily, if you go to our website, it's very convenient that on the very opening page, there's a little donate button. They make it very simple to just mash that button and begin the process. And any contribution is welcome. And we also share our wealth in other ways as well. We share our wealth in that we show up here. It's lovely to have everybody here, and your presence is certainly of value. It's, I consider it certainly of wealth. And another way we do it is sharing our wealth is we share our experience and our knowledge. And we do that by offering various programs and offerings throughout the week. And we have offerings virtually every day of the week. Tonight, this afternoon, we have a yoga class that Julie holds on Monday night. Michael has, Mathlebly Order meets here. Tuesday and Wednesday, we have Mathlawi, which I turned to Michael Bayless. Yes, thank you. I need prompting there. That helps me out a lot. And on Thursday, we have here, as we look collectively to make our spiritual path more contemplative. Every Thursday night, here we have simply sitting in silence, which is a contemplative exercise. On Friday nights, how often? Once a month on Friday nights, we have a kind of a drumming and chanting thing that is done. Anyway, there's a lot going on, and rather than trying to come up with the times, which I always get wrong, they're available on the website, and they're regular and they're ongoing. But in addition to that, we have a number of events that take place around here that I can't remember all of them, but let me start with next Sunday. Next Sunday is our guest speaker Sunday, and we are honored to have all the way from Africa, Father Centurio, who's going to be our guest speaker next week. And I also want to point out that after our meeting next Sunday, a very important event, and that is our guiding council meeting meets next week as well. And that's, well, there'll be a little bit of break for tea and coffee or whatever, but it's following our guest speaker service. Today, this afternoon, right after our meeting, Joey has given everybody the opportunity to roll up your sleeves and join her in a little bit of a landscaping project. So that's something to look forward to. And then there's some other things going on. Sally Jo?
Yes, a few things. Jamal has a one-day Saturday workshop happening on August 17th, Saturday, and that will be an experiential workshop with meditation and chanting and discussion and small and large group work and some Qigong and all kinds of different variety of experiences from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And if you would like to register for that, that one does require registration, so we'll know who's coming, and there's a small tuition for that. And if you can talk to either myself or Jamal after the service to get registered for that, or you can email me if you have my email too. Also, we have our community is trying to be involved in the interfaith build that Habitat for Humanity is it's happening for interfaith groups all over the city and county. It's happening in South Seattle. There's a home being built for a family who will then buy that home at very low interest, and it provides a home for people who otherwise would not be able to buy a home in this area or any area. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to join in the building of the home. And you may say, well, I don't know how to build a home. Well, I don't know how to build a home, but they find tasks for everybody to do, and they'll teach you what you need to know to help in this process. And that's happening the first and second weekends of September. Now, I waited till today. I'm going to send out to our membership another announcement about how to register for that. Again, you don't register through me, but through the Habitat for Humanity folks. And it doesn't cost you anything to register, but they need to know how many people are coming. And you can pick your day and dates. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for 2 weekends, the first 2 weekends in September. And so they're filling up, but they're also trying to get a variety. There's also a little bit of interfaith program at the very beginning where they draw people together and make everybody help everybody understand that we're doing this as an interfaith service to our own brothers and sisters in our own area right now. And that should be a wonderful opportunity if people want to join that. There are some other things happening. There's a book reading coming up. I don't remember the date now, but again, I sent that out. It's, okay, good. The Wednesday, August 7th, the Spiritual Directors International is presenting a reading about the poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke, who many of us are familiar with his poetry, very spiritual, wonderful poetry. And a book was written recently by one of their members, Desire the Change, Radiance and Resilience in the Poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke. That's happening at 7 o'clock on August 7th here in the sanctuary. Thank you, George. And then, I don't know, Jamal, was there anything else I'm forgetting? Okay, that's good. Thank you. Oh, yes, I think that Steve has something to share, too.
Good morning, everyone. What I would like to share is a film that's come out of Africa called The Spirit of Ubuntu. And if you're not familiar with that term, it essentially means I am because we are. The stronger that we are as a community, the stronger I am as an individual. And the philosophy of Ubuntu is starting to spread more around the world. I'm hearing it more and more frequently at different sites that I go to. And the Charter for Compassion is promoting the idea of Ubuntu. There's a special film offering at the Seattle International Film Festival. That screening is today, but it's been booked up for months. unfortunately. But there is a screening on Bainbridge Island this coming Wednesday, and it's from 6:45 p.m. until 9. Essentially, if you sign up for it, it's by donation. So it's whatever feels right for you, and it's essentially the cost of a ferry ride. I do have, there's some sheets in the front of the church or by the doors. And then I have one with a QR code. And if you're interested in possibly attending this, please see me and you can copy the QR code and that'll take you to the registration site. We're really promoting this partly because it's being produced by a lovely man, Pato Bento, and Antoinette, his wife, is the person who's moderating the film. It involves a lot of interviews amongst different people in 12 different countries in Africa about their experience of Ubuntu and what it means to them. And we're really hoping that this idea catches on more in the US because we would all prosper much more if we would stand together as opposed to being in our own silo apart from everyone else.
Steve, Mr. Ubuntu is right here, all
Yes.
the way from Las Vegas.
Okay.
This is Brother Gar, who is Mr. Interfaith in America and International. I mean it sincerely.
I mean it sincerely.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, my brother.
Yes, welcome, Guard. And from my understanding, you either were the director of Ubuntu or the producer? Producer, okay, yes. So,
If you're doing a film, 10 nations in Africa, you might want to have a good African-American doing the film. So Pato and Antoinette were absolutely perfect in doing the film. And I hope you get a chance to see it because the scene in the first part shows what the world will become someday, thanks to the work of Jamal and all of you, that we are because I am, and I am because we are. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you, and nice to meet you, and thank you, Steve. Any other announcements, upcoming gatherings you'd like to speak to? So now I just want to, first of all, restate the obvious, that our discernment this year is making a home for the mystic heart. And as I've said several times before, there's at least two ways to interpret the meaning of making a home for the mystic heart. And for me, one of those is making a home in preparation for that mystical experience, for that unity with the divine. And the other way that I look at it is having had a mystical experience, having touched upon that unity with the divine, how do we make that understanding feel at home in our everyday lives? So making a home, making in and of itself, almost by definition, means there's going to be change. And so as we've done so far every Sunday this month, we've looked at the way that forgiveness and confession can contribute to that change in our lives. And when speaking of confession, this book, Into Spiritual Meditation, is a book that was selected to be, for lack of a better phrase, a companion book for our Making a Home for the Mystic Heart this year. And I've been using it sort of as a springboard, if you will, for our conversations here and during our services. And so when I go to Bastian and he talks about confession, here's what he says, or one of the things he says. It is vitally important that we be totally honest with ourselves about the thoughts, words, and habits that cause us to suffer. Each of us has our own unique set of negatives that we don't often recognize until we are mired in personal crisis or pain. Unless we recognize the cause of suffering, we cannot eliminate them and be happy. In recognizing them, we should confess to ourselves that they exist and be sincerely remorseful for them. This is not about beating up on ourselves. It is about taking personal responsibility for the causes of our own suffering. We simply take stock and admit that the things about ourselves that we don't approve of and would like to go away. We shine the light of mindfulness and love into the shadows of our unconscious. And further along, when he starts to go from confession to forgiveness, I picked that up when he says, having taken a good look at ourselves, we need to cultivate a sense of forgiveness. Having honestly assessed, confessed, felt remorse over our negative emotions, actions, habits, and predispositions, and regenerated our inward love, we need to find some measure of forgiveness. So we can also look at confession and particularly forgiveness in two directions. One is the role of forgiveness and how it plays in our preparation for making a home for the mystic heart and for our mystical experience. And we'll also look at forgiveness in light of having had that mystical experience I spoke of, and how forgiveness aids in our making that experience of oneness with the divine feel natural in our homes and our daily lives. And Bastian addresses the second issue later on in this section, where he says, in some traditions, the process of transformation entails a return to our natural or essential state of being. This presupposes that beneath the covering of thoughts, emotions, memories, habits, and desires, there lies a pure soul or consciousness that is waiting to be rediscovered. Often, this process is one of emptying out all the attributes of our false self in order to reveal and rest gently in the purity, bliss, and wisdom that is the potential of all beings. So I'm going to be speaking about forgiveness then. If you stay with me with this one, I'm going to choose the terms both from a relative perspective, that of the body-mind, and also from a what Bastian called essential state of being. Some would say the absolute, where ultimately with that experience, there is no other one to forgive. And I wanted here today, speaking of this world of body-mind, I want to relate a story from my own experience. And I've shared this with a couple of others here, so those who I haven't heard this story before, be patient with me. But I volunteered at a place called the Human Services Campus down in Arizona. It was a huge complex, a campus actually, where it would connect people with services, mostly to the homeless community in Phoenix, but also to those underprivileged as well. And as I say, when I say it was a huge facility, that campus would have well over 1,000 people a day visiting the campus. So we're not talking about a small little shelter, we're talking about a major enterprise. So within that Human Services campus, there was a section that was called Lodestar Day Resource Center. And that was the place where people could hang out, socialize, and also there's a number of other programs and support available there as well. And within that, there was a number of things that I was involved in. And one of those programs was a reentry program, a program for people who had been recently released from prison and were reentering into society, and helping them to do things like set goals, find work, housing, etc. There was also one of the other things that we did in that LEAP program, that Lodestar Ex-Offender Action Program, was we had a ongoing support group that met twice a week. And people would meet and chat and express themselves and vent on occasion. And yes, there was also often a lot of anger and resentment expressed. And I recall one day that this new man joined the group, a very large, imposing man. He had been recently released after 20 years in prison, a most taciturn individual. He just sat there with his arms crossed and just was silent. And I think it was the second day he was there. People were around, and they were talking about what they were going to do, what their plans were. They're going to reconnect with family. They were going to try to do this. And finally, he spoke up, and he said, "I'm going to get even." And my heart sank, because looking at this gentleman, I was kind of wondering where this was going to go, where he was heading. And the next line out of his mouth is, he said, "I'm going to spend my life getting even with all the people who did me right." And it sent chills up my spine, because I was so not expecting that. It's almost like a joke where you got yourself leaning in one direction only to be tossed completely in the other direction. And it was interesting how wrong, how what's the word I'm looking for? You read people, you judge people, you make assumptions about people. But what he said at the time, I can't even express it, was so lovely, said so lovingly, that the whole room felt silent and nobody knew what to do next. He went on to confess to the group that he had hurt a lot of people, and a lot of people had hurt him. But he had plenty of time for reflection. 20 years in prison gives you time to think, among other things. And he made a decision to let go of resentment, to let go of those who had done him wrong. Not to forget, but to forgive, and to lead his life going forward, a positive life, a life that was constructive. And it so impressed me that happened actually several years ago, but it's indelible in my mind, and I can just picture that event clearly in my mind. So I guess my point is that if someone like him with so much baggage can put the past behind him and focus only on the positive going forward, so can we. I'd like to read this little story, I guess you'd call it. It's a Zen story that maybe you've heard before, but I think it's apropos. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. At one point, they came to a wide, muddy stream. As the monks were preparing to cross the stream, they saw a young woman also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. The junior monk walked straight past her without giving her a thought and crossed the stream. Without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the stream, and placed her gently on the other side, and carried on with his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless. An hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3. Finally, the younger monk could not contain himself any longer, and he blurted out, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you pick her up and carry her?" The older monk looked at him and replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the stream. Why are you still carrying her?" So this simple Zen story has this beautiful message about living in the present moment and how we carry around the past. We carry on past hurts, holding on to resentments. And the only person that we're really hurting is ourselves. The author and Franciscan priest Richard Rohr says when speaking to this same issue, "One of the great surprises is that humans come to full consciousness precisely by shadowboxing, facing their own contradictions and making friends with their own mistakes and failings." So while we may hope that as we go along our spiritual path that we are now more conscious, that we're more aware of ourselves and what our actions are, still, most of us, if not all of us, remember having done things that we regret. We remember people that we've hurt. Perhaps not as egregiously as my friend in Phoenix, but now that we can better see, that we can be more conscious of how our actions and how our behavior help other people, we often feel guilty. And since feeling guilty is uncomfortable, we often try to turn away from it whenever that memory is recalled. So I'd like to do a little exercise, if you will. If you're willing, I'm going to try a little 5-minute or so mindfulness exercise together. And this is in an effort to see if we can shine some light on our shadows, as Bastian says, and try to both offer and to welcome forgiveness. So perhaps you can think of an occasion in your past where you offended someone or hurt someone's feelings. An incident that you clearly remember, one that still makes you feel uncomfortable to this day. An incident in which you regret your behavior and the effect it had on that other person. Not some catastrophic event like a romantic breakup, but for this exercise today, let it be some small affront, an insult, a disrespect, but still one you still regret. It could be that it wasn't intentional, simply a faux pas, a slip or a gaffe. Or perhaps it was intentional at the time, which even makes it more memorable for most of us. And maybe it was just a momentary, uncharacteristic lapse of restraint, maybe while driving, at a family gathering, a cocktail party, or whatever. Either way, you hurt someone's feelings, and it still bothers you today. So try to recall that event. And I'll give you a moment now to try to do that. So if you have a vision in mind and are willing, let's try this together. Sit back. If you haven't already done so, close your eyes and relax. Try to picture that incident, that person you offended. Better still, Try to remember you felt after the event, once you had time to reflect upon it. Holding that picture or feeling clearly in your awareness, and if you are comfortable doing so, inwardly confess, saying something like, I know I was wrong, or I know I offended you. If words like that don't resonate with the image you are holding, use whatever words rise up in you, whatever feels right to you. It's important to remember that we're not trying to make ourselves feel anything. We are simply inclining the mind and heart towards forgiveness. And breathe. Try to find that uncomfortable feeling that you are holding. Can you locate it somewhere in your body? Can you see it? Can you feel it? If you can, try to examine that feeling. Inspect it like it was an exhibit in a museum. Does it have texture? Does it have color? Then repeat those confessing words. I know I offended you, or whatever words you have chosen. Again, this is not meant to be some morbid introspection. We are simply being present with what we feel, not judging, simply observing. Go at your own pace. Are you beginning to feel anything like genuine sorrow? Is there an intention arising within you to ask for forgiveness? If not, try repeating your words again. Let yourself be open to embarrassment, to sorrow, and regret. Remember, you are no longer the same person that offended. Now you might feel your readiness to finally let go and ask for forgiveness. Or you may not be. It's okay, it's fine. You might try again another time. But if you are ready, then simply ask, I ask for your forgiveness. Please forgive me. And release by taking a few long, deep breaths. You might consider visually seeing yourself physically setting your burden down on the floor, on a table, leaving it there forever. Now, to the extent that you are ready, offer yourself forgiveness. I forgive myself. I release me from the pain of not forgiving myself. Now, allow yourself to consider you released. Free to let go of the association you had with that incident. It may still be a memory, but hopefully no longer a haunting memory. When you are ready, come back to your breath. Take your time. In a minute, I will end this exercise. So, did it work? That's the question. If yes, perhaps you can use it to chip away at more difficult, more embarrassing, more humiliating memories that you still may be attached to. If it works, you can abide in that place inside that cannot be hurt, cannot be offended. If no, if it did not work, can you modify this exercise though it can work for you? So this was just a foray into intentionally sitting with our uncomfortable feelings, a practice that perhaps we can revisit again sometime in the future. Steve, take a little musical interlude. Again, thank you, Steve. So, and moving in a little different direction, if we have had a taste of that mystical experience of unity with the divine, and if we're trying to make that understanding feel at home in our daily lives, then perhaps there is the recognition that ultimately there is nobody to forgive and no reason to be forgiven, for we all share a common being. If that is our experience, if we have a glimpse of that feeling of felt oneness, that unity with the divine, we are probably looking for ways to help to populate our daily lives with the understanding that comes with that experience. And whom else would we confess? And to where would we go to seek forgiveness other than to the divine within ourselves? How else do we recognize the illusion of the separate self, our perceived different distance from the divine? And where do we go? What do we do to try to repair that disparity? And there are many ways to do this. In Christianity, there are many. When I grew up, I remember in Sunday school reciting Kyrie eleison, Greek for Lord, have mercy. There is also something known as the Jesus prayer. And it is expressed delightfully in this book, The Way of the Pilgrim. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read this absolutely delightful book. It comes from the Eastern Orthodox tradition. It's a translation from the Russian 19th century. And it's a recounting of the narrator's journey as a pilgrim, practicing a noetic prayer known as the Jesus prayer. It's kind of summed up basically in this one little section I thought I'd read to you here. So when this pilgrim is being taught this Jesus prayer, here's how it's explained to him. Sit down, alone and in silence. Lower your head, shut your eyes, breathe. Breathe out gently. And imagine yourself looking into your own heart. Carry your mind, that is your thoughts, from your head to your heart. As you breathe out, say, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Try to put other thoughts aside. Be calm, be patient, and repeat this process very frequently. So the pilgrim in this story is moved by the words from Paul in the First Thessalonians, where he says, pray without ceasing. And the person in this book, this pilgrim in the book, takes it literally. But whether or not we accept his single-mindedness or not, we have to admire his sincerity and his conviction. And so when I read this book, that was my takeaway, is that once you choose your method, once you choose your way to remedy, if you will, that illusion of separateness and our oneness with the divine, stick with it, repeat it often, as they say. But there are many other ways of doing this as well. There are many, many, many prayers for forgiveness in Hinduism. And I'd like to take a bit of a chance today and touch upon something that's borrowed from Hinduism. Not only is it a prayer for forgiveness, I think it's something beautiful for us to experience together. It is a Sanskrit prayer to the goddess for forgiveness. It is recording by Krishna Das. Many of you have heard of him, an American vocalist known for his kirtan performances. And this performance I'm going to try to play, see if it works, is of several verses from A Prayer to Beg Forgiveness from the Goddess, written by Adi Shankara, an 18th century Vedic scholar and teacher at Advaita Vedanta. It begins with the words that translate something like this: I don't know how to pray to you. I don't know how to open my heart to you and tell you of my suffering. But this I know, O Mother, that to take refuge in you will destroy all my sorrow. But for me, the words don't matter much. I've played this a number of times for myself, and I let the sounds of the words flow over me like holy water over an infant's head at a Christian baptism. So let me play this and see if we can share this joy together. The world is too much with us. Well, maybe it won't work. We must be having some kind of connection problem. I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. So apropos of our meeting today, please forgive me. Well, it looks like a no-go. Oh, yeah, boy. It worked every other time I tried this, but you can see me afterwards. I'll give you the connection. Trust me on this. It's actually quite lovely. But the best laid plans of mice and men. Moving on. Besides this tradition, I talked about the Christian, tried to talk about the Hindu tradition, but there's a number of prayers also in Judaism, and of course there's Yom Kippur, so Yom Kippur, however you pronounce that properly. So there are passive, this is a kind of a passive way to go about that connection. There are also active ways of going around that connection. That's why I mentioned the prayers in Judaism and also Yom Kippur, which is a practice. And in Islam as well, there's a forgiveness prayer in Islam called Astaghfirullah. Sally Jo mentioned it last week in the service that Jamal had. But Michael and I arranged this prior to that, so we're going to go forward with this. And also, what's different, Michael's going to do it in a different way, because while this is passive, what he's going to do is an active practice. So at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to my dear friend, Michael Douglas.
do this all without knocking over my beverage? Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure this is an active practice, although we will be getting up and moving. I think internally it's more of a receptive practice, but we have to, it's being receptive while we're out doing things in the world is kind of worth practicing. So, we're talking about all these different kinds of forgiveness, really. Forgiving other people, forgiving ourselves. There's a beautiful practice in Orthodox Christianity, and there's similar practices, I know, in Judaism and other traditions, where one day a year, the entire congregation of the church gets together in a circle, and you stand in front of each person individually and say, please forgive me for anything I've done in the last year that might have hurt you or offended you or angered you. And they either do or they don't. And, and you bow to each other and you go on to the next person. And we're not going to do that. We've done that before in this congregation. But it's a really powerful practice. And every interaction is different. Every interaction is personal because you're really asking that person and, the entirety of their personality and reactivity to you and whatever the hell image they have of you that they're projecting on you and you're projecting whatever on them. These things are never perfectly clean, right? Humans and humans. And so every person, this sense of asking for forgiveness, it has a different flavor. And but I think there's a flavor of forgiveness that goes through all of these things, whether we're asking someone for forgiveness, whether we are forgiving them, whether we're asking God for forgiveness, whether we're forgiving God, which needs to happen too sometimes. We mentioned Teresa of Avila. My favorite story about Teresa of Avila is she ran a bunch of different monasteries for nuns, so she had to travel sometimes from monastery to monastery, and she was going out on a trip around, to check her people, planning a trip of several weeks, and she started out on foot, and it was after a big rain, and she wasn't more than a mile away from her monastery, and she slipped into a ditch and fell in water up to her waist. And she looked up to heaven and said, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few of them. So there's a lot of forgiveness to go around, is my point. But in the Sufi tradition, they talk a lot about, and the Muslim tradition in general, they talk a lot about the names of God. And the names of God are not just, titles. They're qualities, they're states, they're facets of reality, let's say. And forgiveness is a facet of reality. Whether I'm forgiving you or whether you're forgiving me, it's an experience of a certain flavor of reality. And we can touch the quality that is underneath all of these different sort of interactions and narratives about forgiveness that we have. Underneath it all, there's just this sense of what forgiveness is in and of itself. And we can taste that, you know? And so anyway, that's what this practice we're going to do is about. We're going to, unlike how I normally do this, I'm going to say exactly what we're going to do before we do it, instead of just like expecting everyone to catch on right away. So we're gonna sing this Arabic phrase, astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah literally means God forgive me, God forgive. But in the Arabic root, it has a sense of turning towards something. Astaghfir. So it's a sense of turning towards God. And the sense is that, oh, that's Karen's. I used to hang on her wall. The sense of that is that forgiveness is automatic. Forgiveness is not a, it's not transactional, and it's not really cause and effect even. It's not, oh, please forgive me. Yes, I will forgive you. That's how humans do things, you know? But that's not how reality works. All we have to do is turn towards God in this space of forgiveness, and we are forgiven. There is no this, then that. It's the same motion. Our motion towards God is the same as God's motion towards us. So, I'm gonna preview exactly the motions of this so that you can figure out if it works for your body. We're just gonna walk slowly in a circle like this for a while, and then we're gonna stand in one place and step in 4 directions like that. And I'll have a drum, so I won't be doing this. So you have to remember this hand motion. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. That was lovely. So we're coming to a close of our meeting, our service today, the point we call dedication. And I'd like to end this by just saying a couple of things. One is wherever we are in our making a home for a mystic heart, we do so as flawed beings. And we heard today that we need to be totally honest with ourselves, that we need to shine the light of mindfulness and love into the shadows of our unconscious. And I think that's precisely what we tried to do today. So I'd like to close with a quote from a Canadian author from the Wabaseemogue Independent Nations in northeastern Ontario. His name is Richard Wagamese, and his book is called Embers, One Ojibwe's Meditations. And he says, watching morning break, I realize again that darkness doesn't kill the light. It defines it. I believe that now. For years, I didn't. I believed I was my failures, mistakes, misjudgments, shortcomings, and wrongs. But I'm not those things. I am the light that shines from my faith, my courage, my willingness to be vulnerable and to be responsible and accountable. Moments of darkness only highlight that truth these days. I'm moving beyond shame. I'm basking in the light of my own recovery and the brilliance that comes from allowing myself to be seen as I am, warts and all. I'm not just those warts either. I'm the frog who wears them, gradually becoming a prince. Thank you all. And with that, sadly, we need to say goodbye to our friends online. Thank you so much for being with us. And we move to that portion of our service called